Hi, in this episode we're going to be looking at benchtop multimeters, high-end multimeters measurement device. Now benchtop multimeters are the type of device that you're going to find on everybody's workbench. I mean, if you're a hobbyist you can kind of get away with using a field multimeter or a portable multimeter. But really, when you're equipping your workbench, one of the first things you're going to want is a multimeter. I mean, next to your soldering iron, basically, it's a key thing that you're going to have. And the difference between benchtop multimeters and the normal kind of smaller multimeters is usually that they have a much bigger display, they're stackable so that you can put them up on a shelf. So I mean, all of these multimeters have the standard test of voltage, testing resistance, and testing current as well. But they all provide different things like frequency meters, you can have decibelic meters, some of them measure temperature. I mean, I would really advise you to go onto Distrelec's website. They have a huge range of these different multimeters, and for each one of them there's a lot of documentation and advice available as well. You can quickly compare and see which type of multimeter has got the features that you like. Now, in this video we're going to look at 4 different multimeters, the lower end, if you like, being this Uni-T, which is it's quite a good price actually for the amount of testing that you can do with it and the amount of features that it has, and all the way up to then things like this Keysight unit, which is at the higher end of the general purpose multimeters. So to begin with, let's take a look at the Uni-T UT804. This is kind of at the lower end of the price range of benchtop multimeters. But that's not to say that it's a bad multimeter. I actually quite like Uni-T equipment. I mean, it's bold and red, and I mean, that looks kind of nice. But for the money, you actually get quite a lot of features. And also, it does actually have a very nice big display on this. I mean, it's LCD, which is a little bit lower contrast than you get with some of the more expensive ones. But for the amount of features that you get and the usability of it, it's a pretty intuitive multimeter to use. So for example, we're going to do a couple of tests with each one of these, just very, very simple tests. So here we can switch it into voltage mode. We'll take a trusty 9-volt battery and just pop the probes on there and have a quick look at how fast it auto ranges. And that's very impressive. It gets to the 9.5 volts very, very quickly. Similarly, if we want to just test a resistor quickly, we can switch it into resistance mode. And this knob is it's a little old school. I mean, I actually prefer the ones that just have the buttons that you punch. But still, I mean, it's quite clear what it's doing. Let's just connect it up. And it auto ranged very, very quickly actually. It's quite an impressive speed that it has. And it's reading 1K, which is what you'd expect from a 1K resistor. So on the whole, I mean, for a hobbyist or for someone that's doing quite light measurement, you know, not doing professional high-end work, I would say, but for day-to-day use, this is actually a really good choice. I like the Uni-T stuff and I think it's good quality. So next up we have the Instek GDM-8245. This again, I mean, it's a similar sort of price range to the Uni-T, a little bit more expensive, but nothing to write home about. It's a good multimeter. I mean, it has a nice display on it. It's an LED display, so it's quite easy to read even if you have fairly low light. It has the power switch, which 3 of them do. It's just a Uni-T that suffers from that quirk. Again, though, with this one, the probes that come with it, I mean, it's a little unusual to have these right-angled probes with a bench top. I mean, because on the Uni-T they're down here, so they're going to be in the way of the other units that you've got stacked up. On this one, it just doesn't look very neat. I mean, it's much nicer if these come straight out. And I will actually say that given the price of this, because it may be a lower end of the price range, but it's still a considerable amount of money for a multimeter. The probes that you get with it are actually quite cheap. They're kind of a bit nasty. I mean, the first thing I would do if I bought one of these is to get some decent probes. And that's a bit of a shame because it's not something that I would have compromised on if I was selling this type of thing. And overall, the build quality of the GW Instek is okay. It doesn't actually feel as good as the Uni-T. It's a little bit plastic. But from an ease of use point of view, I actually think this is superior to the Uni-T. It has a nice, clear, you just punch a button to switch the modes. It doesn't have any dials or anything like that. You can just reach over, press the type of setting you want. And again, we'll just take the 9-volt battery and just put the probes on it. It's not quite as quick as the Uni-T, but it's perfectly acceptable. It got to the 9.5 volts nice and fast. And then we'll check with the resistor, switch it into resistance mode. Just connect that up. A little bit of clicking going on. I mean, it's not as quick as a Uni-T again in the auto ranging, but it got to 1K pretty fast. I mean, it's a perfectly acceptable measurement device. So now we move to the more high-end multimeters. This is, again, it's a general purpose multimeter from Keithley. It's the 2110. And this is really, I mean, it's very, very feature rich. When you look at the actual details of what it can do and the types of testing that it can do, these will give you, or this style of multimeter will give you a lot more capability than the lower end ones. And of course, you can jump onto Distrelec's website, you can go through the data sheets, you can see all about, a lot of details about these extra features. So, but today we're just having a look at it from a sort of usability point of view, and I would say that the controls are very nicely laid out. The probe quality is really good, the cables are good, the probes come straight out the unit so that when you stack this up, they're not going to be getting in the way of anything. The one thing that is kind of surprising about this though is the display. I mean, it's a really good high contrast display. I mean, it's quite easy to read, but it's so small. I mean, given the size of space that's available and the cost of this multimeter, I would expect it to have a much bigger display. I mean, the quality of the display is fine, but when it's on your desk and it's in the, you know, it's a little bit in the distance, you want to be able to just look up at it and immediately read the reading from it. And it fails a little bit in that respect. I mean, the build quality is absolutely amazing. It's a metal case, it's got rubber buffers around it to protect it, but the display lets it down, it has to be said. So let's just give it a quick test. We'll switch it into voltage mode. And one of the other things that I find a little bit surprising about this is you can see the display is hopping around like a crazy bunny at the moment. And, you know, that's okay. But you've got to remember this thing's going to be sitting right at eye level on your desk all day long. You really don't want it pulsing around like a crazy person. You want that to be kind of like either it's measuring and it's moving around, or it's just stable. So that's a little bit of a minus point in my books. Still, let's take our trusty 9-volt battery and just connect the probes. And it's very, very fast. It's even faster than the Uni-T. It hit 9.5 volts as soon as I touched the probes there. So that's pretty clear an advantage of this. It's an extremely quick auto-ranging multimeter. And again, we'll just take the resistor, put it into resistance mode. Unbelievably fast. I mean, the thing I will say about this is if you're doing a lot of measurements, then even though it's only half a second difference, that's really nice. I mean, the fact that it's just so quick, it's unbelievably faster for an auto ranger. So if it had a little bit of better display, this would clearly be the best out of the four actually. But I have to say that the display is so important on these that it loses a few points in my books just because of that. So last but definitely not least is the Keysight U3402A. This again, I mean, the build quality is exceptional. It's an expensive multimeter, don't get me wrong, but it just feels and looks the part. This is the type of stuff that any engineer would love to have on their workbench. The display is stunning. It's large, it's clear, it's not jumping around like the Keithley model. I mean, it's really, really nice and easy to read. The contrast is beautiful, and then the display has a lot of information, and it's a lot of the front of the unit is just taken up with that, and that's perfect. And again, the probes, they're really good too. You know, silicon cables, they feel really nice, really professional. And the other thing that I will say with Keysight is that with this model, they actually supply a range of different probe attachments as well, so that you can have the test clips and also the slightly narrower tips as well for working with finer components. Now, although for the other multimeters you can buy these as optional accessories, and trust me, Distrelec sell all of them, but it's really kind of nice to get it with the unit. When you're spending a little bit more on your test equipment, you really want to get what you want to get. You want all that in the box, so you don't immediately then have to go and buy more. So that's a really nice touch. I mean, they didn't need to do that, but it's kind of nice that they did. And the intuitiveness of the display and of the controls is really, really good. It's totally obvious how to use this multimeter. So again, we'll just do the quick test with this and just connect it up to our 9-volt battery. We are in voltage mode, yes. It's surprisingly slow actually. I mean, if you compare it to the Keithley that we just looked at, which was like a Ferrari, to be frank, it's okay. I mean, it's around about the same as the Uni-T. But for such an expensive unit, you'd expect it to be a little bit quicker off the mark. And again, we can then just test the resistance as well. Let's connect our probes up. And you can see again, it's a little bit slow off the mark. It's nowhere near as quick as the Keithley, but again, I mean, it gets there and it's not too slow. If I was going for the higher end general purpose multimeters, it would be a close race between the Keithley and then this Keysight. But I have to say, I think this Keysight wins, mainly because of the display. I mean, it's one of those things that you're just going to be using every single day. And whether it's got a million features or not, I mean, it's important that it does the right tests and it has the right accuracy. But from an engineering point of view, when you look up from your bench, when you're doing a test, you want to just be able to glance at it and see immediately what the value is. And therefore, the display is 90% of the unit as far as I'm concerned. If it doesn't have a good display, it's not a good multimeter. And the Keysight the display is just really, really good. So that's it for this episode. Just a quick introduction to these different types of benchtop multimeters. Now, I'd say, like a lot of test equipment, it's quite personal what the types of things you're looking for in these. I mean, you're going to be using this type of device all day long, every day, all the time for doing measurements. It's important that you get the right measuring tool for the type of work that you're doing, and also that has the type of features that you expect. If you're a hobbyist, or you're not using these devices too much, I would look at the Uni-T range. I think it's really, really good. GW Instek, they make some superb devices too. I have a combination personally of the Uni-T devices and GW Instek on my desk at all times. I have no real problems with either of them. If you need to do the more high-end testing, if the calibration and accuracy is much more important to you, you can't go wrong with these types of Keysight or Keithley devices. They're really, really good. And Distrelec also offer a calibration service as well, where you can actually purchase them brand new, calibrated by Distrelec, and you can also send them back to Distrelec from time to time to have them calibrated too, which is important if the testing that you're doing is for regulatory or legal reasons. You need to make sure that you have pure confidence in the measuring devices that you're using. So shop around is my advice, but personally, I'm going to try to sneak this one to a bag and see if I can get away with not returning it.